The hardest part was trusting myself enough to make tough choices, like doing things that were unpopular.
My head in a corner being like, can I do this? Am I out of my element? All these people are trusting me.
If you focus on brand, you focus on that right experience, price and value they don't always reflect.
Can you define a good CEO? What's up, everyone? It's Mahmood here, and we are back with Built in America. But today's a special one. We've done 15 episodes thus far of this podcast. And today, I'm sharing the best clips, the most valuable insights, the wildest moments, and the lessons that actually move the needle to building and buying a really good business. Let's roll the tape. To me, the definition of a CEO is making the highest quality decisions of the company and hiring the best people around you to make the company perform at its highest ability, right? Can you define a good CEO?
Define a good CEO. I mean, what I've learned now, I think it's someone that can hire and attract people way better at them at the specific parts of their business that are needed, and then enable those people to do what they do best. I would say that's probably it. And it's super important because if you find yourself, again, having to babysit a part of your business, it's probably because you didn't hire the right person.
I mean, it seems like you're balancing a lot because you're obviously serving to large enterprise companies at the same time.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, I'm dealing with the biggest problems we have. I try to put people in place for every part of what you just said. And then I go, look, where are we breaking? And I'm going to go jump in there and try to help and build it back and, figure out why it's broken and who do we need to personnel change, all those kind of things. So that's my role. And then, I end up obviously working with all the companies we're acquiring and spend time there. But it really is that, everyone asks for like the typical day of a CEO. It's like, in this stage of business, there isn't a typical day. It's like whatever needs the help.
I think a CEO is somebody who leads and highly regards all of the people that they're in charge of leading, respects them and supports them. So I think as a female CEO, there's often this idea that I have to be masculine if I work with a lot of men and be more commanding and more assertive and controlling. And I think those are great qualities, but I think it's important as a CEO to be true to yourself in the way that I like to be very feminine in it, which the feminine nature is supportive and nurturing and anticipating needs, right? So if I'm anticipating the needs of a person in my life, I might say, okay, they might be hungry. I should find something for them to eat. That's just part of my nature. Where with my partners or my investors, I'm thinking, okay, I have investor meetings. They might want to know these KPIs. They're going to want to know the churn rate. They're going to want to know all these things. I need to have that ready for them so that they don't expect it by any means. But when they come to me right before they're about to ask, I can give it to them. And instead of having my staff and kind of pushing and feeling controlling in this way, I always ask them, how can I support you? And have one-on-ones with them and check in on them and be nurturing in that way. So I think everyone has qualities within them that are transferable to being a CEO. And I think anytime you're not in your natural path or what feels right to you, I think that people can tell.
Bradley, being a CEO of a large company like yourself is not easy. And obviously you coming into a business where it's family owned and then, getting that position over others potentially as I'm sure there's a lot of employees at your company. What has been the hardest part about being CEO of your business today? And what is something that shocked you throughout the process?
Yeah, I think the hardest part is that the purview that I have and the amount of things that I really want to move forward and keep track of all the time is it's a pretty wide scope of work. When I took over the company, I knew that digitizing the business was really of interest to me. I knew that having an e-commerce platform where we could service, thousands of independent mom and pop retail stores around the country was really what I saw as like this huge potential future for the company. The hardest part was trusting myself enough to make tough choices, like doing things that were unpopular. When you come into a family business, I think one of the things that the kind of succeeding generation wants is to be liked by the people there. And it took me a long time to get comfortable with doing things that I knew were right for the company that might not have been popular with the people around me. Which I think that's a universal challenge for any leader. It's you got to make the tough calls.
So my job on a day-to-day basis is to hire excellent CEOs. And I can tell you are molded into a CEO role. I know you were a former lieutenant.
Yeah, so I was a lieutenant, but ended my career as a lieutenant colonel.
There you go.
Which just means that I went through a multitude of leadership training and courses. And I will tell you that I am so thankful to my military service because of what they did to train and teach me really good foundational leadership skills. My suggested style is what I think that the military trains. I think it's also, what the Bible trains, but it's servant leadership. What are you doing to serve? And when I think about table stakes leadership qualities, I will start with how are you serving your team? Not how are they serving you? So how are you providing resources? How are you clearing roadblocks? How are you coaching and mentoring? How are you identifying wins and doubling down on those? Or how are you identifying challenges and, figuring out how to solve through? How are you empowering your team so that they can be really great to do their job? How are you making sure that, the break room's stocked and that the toilet paper rolls are changed and, just basic things, and being willing to dive in and do anything that it takes to take care of your team, I think is important. And I embrace that hugely. So I think the relentless positivity would be a thing. The service component would be a thing. I think it's our job as leaders to provide the why. Simon Sinek talks about this, and I love the old school, TED talk about the why. And it's this mission. It's what's the purpose? And people get inspired by purpose. And it's our job to inspire and motivate to keep them moving forward. And so for Fluid Logic, our why is to hydrate humanity. That's it. We want to hydrate humanity. We know what hydration does. We know what it does for us. We know what it does for humans. Majority of our bodies are comprised of water. So obviously you need to take care of this resource and do that. So when we think about, we are really making the world a better place by delivering against this product and improving people's, in the moment activities and lives and jobs, but over a longer term, really improving their overall health and wellness, their longevity, their lifespan and activity span longevity. It's impactful. And who's not excited to participate in something that's going to make everybody better at what they do? And by the way, generate wealth while you go. It's like literally capitalism in its ideal state. And so I think also, delivering against the why is a really important thing that we have to do as leaders.
Any entrepreneur starting, especially from a founder perspective, like just do the next step. You always want to hold that like big vision that this, shooting for the stars, and you hold that there, but that's not really what you're operating day to day from. The day to day is really just what's this next thing in front of you have to get done. And for us, it was, it's, oh man, we got to go pick up some bathtubs. Can we get 4 today? Can we, can we get something done on the website today? It was just little by little iterations, that played into it. And so, and then from there, like if I were to give feedback to myself on things I look back on of our growth, I don't think we understood the magnitude of what we had. I wish I would have seen it sooner. There were some infrastructure hires that we could have made, like we talked about manufacturing and logistics and some of these things that Mike didn't and I didn't have background in, that we kind of was an all hands on deck move, as opposed to just bringing in just a superstar in that space to move that forward. And we would have, saved a lot of money, reduced our challenges, all of our internal frustrations. So those things, I think getting a sense early on of when to make move even quicker into the right hires and the big hires.
Yeah.
And we were gun shy at first. It was kind of high upside, low experience people. And, there are a couple roles. It's like, man, we should have gone for more industry stars to come in and run this part of the business.
For sure. I think sometimes people need that when running a business, just to understand the people around you and having that soft skill, that interpersonal skills of knowing how to get the best out of people. Dennis, I played football for 20 years of my life, football meaning soccer in America. And a coach once told me that the name on the front of the jersey matters more than the name on the back of the jersey. We all know what that means, right? It's knowing that you are a servant leader for the team ahead. You have relentless passion about what you're building. How do you, as a CEO who's been a CEO of multiple companies, get everyone to think in that same fashion?
This is one of those items, right, for where there's not really many cheat codes. Some places in the organization, you can apply a cheat code to do something faster, cheaper, better. This is probably not one of them. And I think you have to be that example, as in whatever culture you believe you need to put in place. With another side note, you can't really decide. Plenty of people, and I've certainly been young and naive myself, and put in place a set of values that you would like people to kind of latch on to. And you thought because you wrote them on a piece of paper that they are now our values. Now, those values will kind of be extracted from how you behave and what you can kind of extract from you into that kind of initial set of people. So I do think it's really just a matter of who you are and how you behave becomes a set of people who look like you and behave like you. If you kind of like who you are, what you do, and how you behave, you can't really fake it. I remember, here's another funny side note. I had a few things I thought was not optimal when I had kids many moons ago. And like, Dennis, don't swear so much. Kind of clean up your language. And initially I did, but like 8 weeks in, I was thinking like, then you can't fake this for 18 years. Like, this is a long game, man. You can't fake it for 18 fucking years. Just be who you are. Or if you really think this is a defect, which is so bad, you just have to change. You don't fake it, just change. And I then figured out, well, this is me. Those defects that are truly defects, go change those. You can't fake it. Not long enough where it matters.
Guys, to make a really good point, if someone's ever trying to change you for who you are as an individual, they're not going to get the best out of you, right? But I think about this, you can build websites, you can do your own marketing, you're a graphic designer, you're cold calling, you know how to do acquisitions, you can do financial modeling, you're doing it all, right? Not many people, if they were to hear this today, they'd be overwhelmed just hearing you. Like, Jeremy's someone of one of none at this point, right? So Jeremy, if you were advising someone today who was starting a venture similar to yours, whether it's home service or something else, and they didn't have all those skill sets, what are the first couple of steps that they would do?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's understated and underrated how easy it is to outsource a lot of this stuff, right? And I do all of this, and I can do all of it, but I also, that earns me the right to go find people who are better at it than me, and I have very happily brought in very talented people who are radically better than me at most of these different disciplines, and they've elevated beyond my kind of base level skills. Me being able to do it myself is really only helpful for the 0 to 1 and for maybe qualifying what great looks like when I go hire people. But inevitably, the job of a founder, if you're successful, is that you're always operating at the edge of your competence, right? Like, definitionally, if you're good at your job, you can have built a business that is bigger than one you've ever run before, presented with challenges you've never faced before, right? And it's just this constant, persistent exercise in solving progressively harder puzzles, the prize for which is a harder puzzle still, and like kicking down bigger and sturdier doors one after the other. So like, it's Everest. Like, don't view the exercise as one of like taking all those steps at once. The exercise is one of taking a single step, followed by another, and before you know it, you'll have traveled a great distance. So step one, bring in talented folks, heavily leverage Upwork and gig markets and your friends who are good at what they do, and have them help you. Step two, don't get intimidated by the sum totality of the work. Just pay attention to what's immediate and most kind of urgent and what you can do today, and the rest will come, right? And like, lastly, I think, I think it's also just this thing where, if you're not willing to bring other smart people on board, and if you're too self-contained, you're not going to go very far, right? Like, I think this I try to get away from the idea that I can do it all, because I definitively cannot, right? Like I can do some of these jobs well, and a large number of them poorly, and many of them not at all. So, while I might be a little more multidisciplinary than the average bear, I do think that, I absolutely, I rely on an incredible number of very talented people every day to do what we do.
That's huge advice. There's a phrase I like to always say is like, in high school, we didn't probably pay attention too much to math and arithmetic, but there's something that what I'm hearing about your story that really resonates with me is back in high school, like we learned about the standard deviation, which is the distance between you and the core, right? Or the core and where you're going next, right? And what I hear what you're saying here is that you had a large reach of very influential people. You figured out how to build a really good team around you. And then you knew how to create some level of IP to get into Walmarts and big stores around you, which created a competitive advantage. So if you're going to start this all over again, you use like what your organic opportunity is, rather than trying to go do something and raise a bunch of venture capital in a sector that you don't really know much about, right? So if you were to start all over today, what are a couple things that maybe you do differently that you can explain to the audience versus what you guys had done in the past?
Yeah, so I'd say a couple things we do differently. We probably would have hired more expertise a little bit earlier. We definitely kind of waited as long as we could, which I think was helpful. It's good to learn manufacturing yourself, but we did end up hiring a VP of manufacturing from Apple. We hired a creative director from EA Games. So over time, we brought in more experts. And I think, maybe if we started over again, we might have done that a little earlier just to navigate some of those challenges that we faced ourselves, or just maybe having experts in the room. And then I would say the second one is probably we built a software over time to help us manufacture. Originally, it was very, I would say, kind of all over the place. You're using Google Sheets and, Excel, and it definitely wasn't kind of managed all in one place. And over time, we built the software to manage our manufacturing process. And I think had we done that earlier, a lot of the hiccups we ran into interfacing with suppliers, working on the designs would have been navigated faster. So I think had we done it again, we probably would have delved more into the software side of the business earlier.
One thing I want to underscore here that I think the audience would appreciate if they're out there trying to go build a product and raise money is there's a dichotomy here in the sense that you're raising money. You don't want to overraise too much, because if you do, you dilute yourself. And then secondly, you want to make sure that your money is being used for the right things. And then when you're going and doing multiple iterations, you're like, oh my God, it's just not working. This is my 6th round making an MVP. I've just burned $7 million. Am I doing the right thing? And then you have this, inflection moment in your career as a CEO is like, oh my God, do I know what I'm doing? Right? I'm using other people's money right now. This is not working out. And we've all been there as entrepreneurs. If you haven't sat in the dark with your hands on your head, wondering what the fuck you're doing, you haven't really done anything hard enough. That's what I say. So I feel your pain. I've been there. I built product as well. And that is one of the hardest challenges of building a company like yours today.
Sam, I don't like to think about being in the dark, crying. But I have, so this is goofy. There has been at least one, I would say probably a couple. I'm a head against the wall, kind of a rester, and like my head in a corner being like, can I do this? Am I out of my element? All these people are trusting me, all these people's jobs. Like I have gone through the holy crap, I am in over my head. Am I really? And then, the wake up the next morning and be like, nope, keep going. And I think that the difference between entrepreneurs that make it and entrepreneurs that don't is just that entrepreneurs that make it keep going. And entrepreneurs that don't, just don't. And I know that sounds so simplistic, but perseverance is a gift. And, having the attitude to want to persevere and to always find that path is also a gift. And when I talk about, to my teams or when I do leadership presentations, I talk about the one thing that I think is so critical, true for entrepreneurship, but true for just leadership in general, is this idea of relentless positivity. And that's not reckless enthusiasm. Everything's just going to work out. And it's not fake cheeriness like, oh, I'm in a great mood and everything's amazing, and let's all be happy today. Those are not. Relentless positivity is knowing that you and your team are smart enough and are going to work hard enough to find the path to yes. And what is it that we need to do to figure that out? Not, here's all the reasons why it sucks or all the reasons why it's no. But what are the pivots that we take to keep going, to get to this end state, this mission that we're trying to achieve? And I think that mind shift about we can and how can we is critical. And there's been a lot of, iterations of that, right? Henry Ford said it a long time ago. If you think you can or you think you can't, you're right. Either way, General Powell, Colin Powell talked about perpetual optimism is a force multiplier, the same kind of an idea set. Relentless positivity is what I call that. And it's a critical component to the teams that I build and for me personally.
There's so much to unpack there. There's this a mentor and a guy, it's a private equity group called Shore Capital that talks about when you go build a company, before even building the company, go build your Fab Five, your basketball team. And we talk about the Fab Five as that was the most infamous team at University of Michigan in college. There were freshmen that went all the way to national champs almost 4 times in a row. And then you went and did that prior to starting this company. And I think what the audience should really appreciate is you had a very direct mission on building this company around an app. That was a signage app. And then you found your people first, and then you went all in on that idea. And you found them in a very unorthodox way. So when doing so, did you go and figure out the voids within the skill sets that you had to go find the right people? Obviously, you found them in a very unorthodox way, like I said, but usually when people go build companies, you're like, okay, I'm a coder today. I don't really have a finance background. I don't really have a tech background, whatever it may be. And you're trying to fill those voids. You as a CEO and the visionary, obviously you found them in a very unique way. How would you go back, 10 years ago and say, I'm going to go build a company with the right 5 people by plugging them in the right places? Like, how would someone want to go do that?
Yes, absolutely. I think it's being very deliberate and also being intellectually honest with yourself on what you can contribute and what you can deliver, what your skill sets are, and then also who can you recruit. So for us, there was a little bit of luck there in that each of us actually had pretty different skill sets. Wow. And when we were building the company, we were building as 21, 22 years old. I was 21 at the time. It is really, really tough. There's so much you have to do. And I was grateful that we really had our lanes. I was going to be the fundraiser, the strategist, the person putting together the vision and the plan of what things needed to be. And then we had somebody who was the designer, who was just great at creating beautiful products. All the products I've worked with, whether it was the last company or at Blaze, it's very visual products. People are building applications that inherently you need to make sure it looks good.
For sure.
Not only easy to use, but looks good. So we had somebody who was great at doing that. And then, of course, you need the person to build it. You need that developer who is going to take the designs and turn it into reality. Then we had another person that was a high school friend of David that joined us. We needed somebody who was just like that polymath hacker, could deal with all the different hardware and nuances. And so he was in charge of that and sourcing, at the time for the last company, we dealt with hardware. And he was just very scrappy in contacting lots of different vendors. I have to say, we did a partnership with NVIDIA. Really, I should have bought that way more NVIDIA stock back in the day because they were so great. They kind of took this chance on a startup, doing the startup with this partnership with us back, I want to say 2015, and was really instrumental in actually helping us grow because they had great hardware that we put our software on top of. But it was these different folks contributing all their unique strengths into being able to make the company successful. And I want to be open and transparent in saying, yes, these were the original 5 people that started it. But I'm also grateful we had the agility, flexibility too, that there were folks that said, you know what, my skill set no longer is contributing to the company's growth. And so we actually had an evolution in the engineering team. And so somebody who was our CTO, who was one of the original co-founders, right afterwards, we actually recruited 2 incredible engineers, Bruno and Tina. They were 2 of the 5 original developers that created Microsoft SQL Azure platform.
they joined our team. And I'm glad that one of the original co-founders was able to recognize, you know what? I think Tina needs to be CTO instead of me, stepped down, and then Tina became CTO for the company. And today, of course, Tina is my co-founder, co-CEO at Blaze.tech. But there was an evolution. And I again want to emphasize it's a really difficult conversation to have.
Yeah.
And there's even been times I'll say, my co-founders said, I don't know if you're the right CEO, Nancy. So we went through that exercise too, where we had another co-founder step in to be CEO to see if they can do a better job. And that actually wasn't a hard conversation when my co-founder sat me down. It was like, hey, we want a change in leadership. I was like, okay, I just want the best for the company. Obviously, we all have equity in the company. I want it to succeed. I was like, all right. So we did that. I think we had somebody else as CEO for maybe like a month or two. And it was really humbling experience. Ultimately, my co-founders wanted me back in the CEO role, but it was a great reminder that I shouldn't have this expectation to be CEO. It's earned in my mind. It's always earned. And I still think about that today. Am I maximizing and am I the best person for this? And the people I'm working with, we always try to push ourselves to make sure we're adding value.
Define a good CEO for us.
I think in different stages of the company, there are different things that are required. I think at the beginning, it's somebody who is the visionary. It's somebody who can say, hey, here's the plan. Another thing is really great communication and sales. And what does sales mean? It's not just, selling the product, it's selling the vision. It's selling somebody to join the team. It's selling investors. It's selling customers to use the product when it might not be fully ready yet, but you need them to try it out and take a chance. I think it's somebody who has high integrity. I think that is so key. Integrity is one of the core values we have at Blaze. In fact, we just had our 2025 team kickoff meeting this morning. And it's the first thing I talk about. Integrity is your actions match your words. And I think that is so incredibly important. When I tell my team members, here's what I'm going to deliver, here's what I'm going to bring in, here's where I'm going to contribute, and I'm going to promise you that I'm going to get great teammates that also are highly skilled, highly motivated, I need to make sure that's reality.
When do you transition from founder, you were a CEO, and now you're a founder and not the CEO role?
So it happened at the very beginning of 2020. Right before COVID, and we were a New York-based company. So in some ways, my timing couldn't have been better because that was a big project for the CEO to have to figure out. But I guess what happened was I believe in the idea. I'm committed to the idea. I never thought I'd start a company, but I did because I want this idea to happen. And I was the most I was leading our fundraising. I was leading our spin out. I was doing a lot of the CEO things. I made the most sense as the CEO at the beginning. But honestly, I didn't love it. It was pretty obvious to me fairly early on that I was willing to do the role. But if given the choice, I would have preferred not to be the CEO. And I think the hard thing, as you said, is that choosing somebody else to be the CEO, it's a huge risk. Because if you choose the wrong person, you can destroy the company and you lose control. And so when you're very early stage, it's who else is going to do this job? You know what I mean? It's kind of like the hiring question where you kind of have to accomplish enough that the opportunity to be CEO attracts somebody of the caliber you would feel okay hiring for the role. And I felt like we had gotten there by the end of 2019. So Dan Yates, who is now our CEO, he was my mentor pretty much from the beginning. And I asked him initially to be CEO because I had correctly identified that he would be a fantastic CEO of this company. But he had recently sold his company, O-Power, and it was a very successful sale, but I think he was very tired. And honestly, I think he just wasn't interested in becoming a CEO, and certainly not Dandelion wasn't yet at the size where I think it was. I get it looking back. But anyway, he declined to become CEO, but he had this person who had been his chief marketing officer at OPower, and he thought so highly of him. His name was Michael, one of his best people. He was like, you should check with Michael, essentially. And so the way I tried to de-risk this transition was what better like vetting could you do than having a mentor who you trust so much, have like so many years of experience working so closely with a person that they think highly of, right? It was like better than I could ever do by interviewing, I felt. So we did end up hiring Michael, and I am very thankful that he stepped in when he did, because I had 2 very young kids at the time. We were based in New York, and when COVID hit, it was like childcare disappeared. New York was on lockdown. We had to do a huge layoff. It was like we weren't even allowed to work as a company in New York during COVID because they had only essential businesses and we weren't essential. So I don't know what I would have done if like Michael hadn't stepped in at that time. So that's how the transition went. But I think you're right that it is hard. It is a hard decision to make.
It is hard. And also you have to come to an inflection point knowing like what your best skill sets are in a company. And sometimes even though you're founder, sometimes doesn't mean that correlates to the CEO, right? I think the founder of Shopify, always want to be a product person and then hire a CEO out because he's like, I'm not a chief executive officer. I'm a chief product officer. Like that's where I really thrive at. And I'm going to ask you, Kathy, you went from, fundraising to creating the vision and idea to also integrating the idea, being a CEO. Then you were not a CEO. What is your zone genius in the company? Where do people find the highest value of you when running Dandelion today?
Well, today my role is president and CTO. So I run the engineering team, but I also run our people team, including recruiting and HR. And I do a lot of our external storytelling as well. And I also run policy at the moment. So I have sort of a mix of functions that report to me, but I would say that my zone of genius is that versatility. Like many founders, I can do all the parts of the business. I'm not afraid to take on something I don't know, and I can figure it out pretty well, pretty quickly, and usually do a good enough job and then help hire the person to do an excellent job. And I like that. I like getting to solve different problems and take on different things over time. I don't think of myself as like, I am this domain, like the product leader from Shopify. I don't have that orientation. I think I'm more of a miscellaneous. I'll just, what does the company need right now? It's always changing. I will solve that problem, or I will figure out who we should bring in to solve the problem. And I think the other thing that I do well for the company is I do think I've just have so much experience talking to different people about geothermal, different policymakers, homeowners, builders, talking to you today. It's like, I love talking about it, and hopefully I can do a good job of explaining why people should care about it.
What would you do differently if you were to build RFT all over again?
If we were to build Art of Tea all over again, I think that what we would do, there's things that I would have done a little bit faster. Like we got a forklift, and we waited till the very last minute to get a forklift. And once we got it, man, we were saving so much time. It's like, gosh, why did we wait so long to get a forklift? I think that I've been very inspired by working with our partners in Japan in their long-term thinking about multi-generational extensions of their quality products that they're building. So I think if I were to start different, I'd be thinking, what does this company look like 20 to 30 years from now? It's hard to think about something that's either 20 years out or multi-generational out, right? So I would be thinking way longer, way longer years at the very beginning.
Yeah, sometimes we build companies, we don't look at the time horizon long enough. We want to see the instant gratification as quickly as possible. We're looking to go get a quick cash cow. And, that's how a lot of businesses are built today. I'm in private equity myself, and you got these funds that have a 5-year horizon to go invest and get a return over 5 years. First, you're doing this based off of, this is your passion. This is a very long-term vision for you now. You're 50 years old. From what I can tell, just from this short conversation with you, you're probably in no place to want to sell this anytime soon. You'd want to just continue and grow this company until, maybe the time comes down the road.
I think whatever you do, my advice, if someone was listening to this, like, I'm starting a company, I want to start a company, what should I do? You should always build it as if you're going to sell it. You should build it with great process, great people, great team. So I'm always open to great dynamic conversations with potential strategic partner. It would have to make sense. It would really have to make sense.
And you're CEO of your company today. What makes a good CEO?
Vision, cheerlead, and be in the details. And being in the details doesn't mean you have to micromanage. We do some projects for Cheesecake Factory, and on one of their openings, I had an opportunity to meet with the founder of Cheesecake Factory, who was sitting in his restaurant while they were getting ready to open. I was like, when are we going to get an opportunity to meet with a billionaire?
Yeah, that's awesome.
And so I was like, listen, can I ask you a question? And he's like, sure. And I said, how did you do it? Like, how did, and he's like, no, it's a good question. You can ask me that question. He says, you look up at the ceiling? I'm like, yeah. He's like, see the paintings around? I said, yeah. So you see the columns over there and the details in the columns? I said, yeah. He said, you see the silverware on the table and the uniforms that the bartenders are using and how they're shaking the cocktail shakers? I said, yeah. He's like, I'm in all the details. He's like, I can't be there for every single opening, but how the menus are laid out, how the team is dressed, how they're greeted, what that experience is like, whether they're in Dubai, they're in Qatar, they're in Dallas, Texas, or they're in New York City, all over the world, that same experience should be a high quality experience through and throughout. He says, that's where I am. I'm in all those details.
Have you heard of founder mode? Brian Chesky was talking about this a lot, the founder of Airbnb. Have you heard of this?
No. Tell me more.
Founder mode. Today we live in a society where, people sometimes their attention is fragmented. And Brian was talking about this on his podcast, that he stays in founder mode. He's also like that, very much in the details. He likes to make sure he's involved in how the brand looks, because what's brand? Brand is what other people perceive your view of your business, right? And that's where you can go arbitrage price. So for a company like yours, being in the detail of the minute aspects of how the art of tea is portrayed to the audience is very important, because you're the one that drives price. And by a founder and a CEO being able to do this, being in the minute details, that's where you're going to get the most exponential value out of your company, by you being the face of it. At the same token, you're also the one showing what the standard is within your company. And I think that's what Brian has put together at Airbnb, which everybody's astounded by. A lot of founders today are taking that model, implementing that into their companies, and I highly respect that.
Yeah. If you focus on brand, you focus on that right experience, price and value kind of, they don't always reflect. If you're getting an incredible experience out of Airbnb, or in our case with Art of Tea, you're getting an incredible experience, price becomes secondary. If you're paying too much for a low quality experience, then you're going to question your values. You're going to question, why did I spend so much on this? But if you're investing in a high quality experience, price again becomes secondary in that process.
Yeah, it's like when people buy these thousands of dollars of wine, they don't even think twice about it. It's just like, it's from Bordeaux, it's from 1978, whatever it may be, and they're willing to go spend that money.
And with that, you should always focus on quality. You focus on creating a great experience. If you focus on creating a great experience, then you continue to bring people back to what you're doing and what you're about.